Hi, everybody. My name is Mitch Donneberger. I am a creative director, illustrator, designer, and brand professional based in Philadelphia. This is my backyard. So today, because it's such a beautiful day, I wanted to tell the story of how a random kid from Delco ended up publishing a shirt worldwide at Uniqlo. So the story actually begins back when I was in high school, I guess. If you haven't been able to tell from videos, I'm an especially lanky person, and I have a fathom, which is the measure of the length of my arms, greater than my height. So it means that basically nothing off the shelf fits me. So in comes a design company that really was at the zeitgeist of using the internet around the Y2K era. So Uniqlo became very famous in at least my world of the Anglosphere by releasing really unusual marketing pieces onto the internet and just otherwise understanding the internet on a level that was uh, pretty groundbreaking for the time. One of Uniqlo's famous characteristics of their retail experience is that they have custom free tailoring. So to enable this, Uniqlo kind of had a default where they shipped all of their clothing and garments a little longer than they really needed to be, so that, with the understanding that you would take it to their tailoring service and get it tailored, and otherwise it would look great that way. But on someone like me, I found out very quickly that you can just sort of buy them as is and not get them tailored, and all of a sudden I have clothes that fit me. So I was a big fan of Uniqlo long before they even actually had stores anywhere on the East Coast. One of the things I admired most about this brand was that they did collaborations with some of the most important and influential artists in my entire life. Great examples: Keith Haring, Charles Schultz, the creator of Peanuts, Star Wars, Andy Warhol, as well as some of the most important and influential scientists and thinkers and teachers in Japanese history. And Peace for All was sort of this effort to highlight the work of fine artists and scientists, contributors to the idea of world peace. So even though it was a dream of mine to eventually, make something that was so successful that it would be on sale at Uniqlo in collaboration, I sort of chalked that up to just, it was the dream of the 18-year-old cartoonist who was just, desperately trying to get into that industry and find some way to make money doing the thing that I like doing. As time progressed, and as my dreams of cartooning refused to pan out, despite any of the work I put into it, so just by sheer circumstance, which is something that I think a lot of millennials will understand, I ended up in graphic design, doing design for tech brands. The last episode we talked about Linny and my relationship and sort of work that we did at Linode. But this really is more about what happened when we became Akamai. Akamai purchased Linode in 2022, but then Akamai only started weaving both Linode and their existing stuff into a single product starting in 2023, which was when Akamai was approached by Uniqlo and basically asked, would you want to do a t-shirt for us on our Peace for All line? And at the time, Akamai's existing art department was working very much with this sort of code motif. It was a brand element that had sort of a fabric of code, sort of like if you watch The Matrix, right? And you see that scene where the guy's looking at all the scrolling code, and he's like, "Oh, I don't see people. I see patterns." The way it kind of netted out after a number of design revisions was they settled on something that used real Akamai product code, which was one of our Edge Worker products, I think, that had been deprecated by that point. But it was genuine, dummied, albeit Go code that if you keyed it back in and you sort of knew the assumptions of the things that were taken out and could put them back in, it was code that could run. And when Akamai released their first shirt, it caused a really big hubbub in the blogging world, where a number of people, including on Hacker News, kind of discovered that this was real code and that you could work on it. And it was a very impressive thing to kind of come across to both Akamai and Uniqlo's leadership, because they were essentially seeing a shirt live on through mimetic culture. So 2024 got off to a very weird start. The company had decided to reorganize itself around its cloud mission and growing that corner of its business as much as it could, and it put a lot of Linode's marketing and brains into the driver's seat at Akamai in order to really expand the cloud business that they were working on. And it's a tight market. It's very, very saturated. If you don't work in it, you probably already know that, because there's AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, right? Like there really is such a question mark as to who that fourth one is. And Akamai's ambition was to be that fourth one, or truly to be the first one. So along with my colleague Sean, they restructured the creative department, and we were working sort of in parallel to the security brand, which was also expanding at the time when we were working on this stuff. So it was running off in both directions. So Uniqlo approached us again because they wanted a sequel to the last shirt, and we were kind of in a position where the whole code motif that we had been working with had been retired because it was sort of at its end of life. Large brands like this do refreshes all the time, and that was one of the pieces of collateral damage when we were refreshing the brand. So they wanted us to do another code shirt, to put it simply. And they wanted to have the same sort of viral effect that the last one did, which was, hiding an Easter egg in the code so that only nerds figure it out and make a big fuss about it. Because then, it raises the esteem of Akamai and Uniqlo, but also, there's not a lot of stuff out there that really talks to the people who build the tech products that we, rely on every day. And sometimes it can just be really nice to have somebody talk to you like you're an adult. We started the design process with sort of a meditation, and that meditation was that we would be really bad art directors if we didn't let our team have access to this opportunity as well. So we got our team together, which was about 7 people wide. And we sat down, all of us, and we just did a jazz session, for lack of a better term, just riffing on different ideas. Together, we put them all on a board, and we gave everybody a couple of votes, and we voted for the ones that we felt we should put in a presentation and send on to Uniqlo. And my design, just by chance or by circumstance, ended up being the one people liked the most. My initial design was actually a sort of a celebration of the World Wide Web and the browser, and that its role in creating this sort of worldwide communications network that we now have access to and is in our pocket and it's in space, and it's literally everywhere that you can be. I tried to incorporate a number of symbols that were important to me, and that was the white dove of peace and the nuclear disarmament peace sign. Now, I was working on these very quickly, didn't really think too much about what those symbols would mean in another culture, especially Japan. And I got a very polite letter back from them, basically saying that, like, we can't use these symbols. But they did really like the fact that I added a Python script that when you keyed it in, it loaded up a little web page that played an animation that said peace for all. So that was sort of the Easter egg aspect that they were asking for, and they really responded well to that. But they wanted us to kind of, for lack of a better term, go back to the drawing board. When we did, I had this creepy feeling like this was going to be a Franken project. What I mean by that is a project that just goes through revision after revision after revision after revision. And to somebody who's experienced in art and design and getting rejected and having their work tweaked and commented on, younger designers, that can be, the only word for it is probably soul crushing, to work really hard on something and have the team on the other end essentially just reject them outright. So I decided to take the rest of the project on myself, just kind of to spare my designers the grief of having to go through, what could be 10 rounds of designs while we have, other work to do that's due just as urgently. And one of the first things that I thought of when I sat down to it and started getting intimidated by the amount of work in front of me was, nerds have enough black shirts. Like, this might not be something that unless you're, in this world yourself. Anytime a company gave out a shirt, it was black. Back when I was in high school, we had shirts that had like white sarcastic text on them, but they were always black. And there was just sort of this stereotype that had developed about Linux and Unix nerds that they will always be wearing black, no matter what. And I wanted to kind of flip that. I decided to explore a different kind of garment color. And the one that I settled on was, the only way I can describe it, if you know, 90s computer beige. Everything in the 90s was made from ABS plastic. And one of the things that they hadn't really figured out yet was how to make ABS plastics like not turn into like the smoker's yellow kind of color. So always everything had this pale kind of sickly tone to it. So I wanted to find something in there that sort of reminded people of what it was like sitting in their living room on a sunny day, just wasting time on the internet, right? And the beige computer is a big part of that. I had this sort of lightning bolt moment when I was sitting in bed trying to go to sleep the night after we got all the feedback from the first round. I was like, what if I made a bash script and encrypted it and then made it so it was really hard to use current tech like OCR or AI or whatever, which bash, if you're unfamiliar, is a scripting language on Linux and Linux-like operating systems. So bash scripts have this piece at the very beginning of every single one of them called the shebang. And the shebang is essentially a comment that tells the computer where to find the program to run the script. And the shebang is famous. Anyone who's ever worked on Linux or worked as a system admin or worked as a network admin, like, they understand what it is immediately upon seeing it. I could definitely use that as a shortcut to give the people who know a hint that this is a script that they can key in and, find if it did something. So what the script actually did when I was done was it emulated something that is very iconic from a video game series I grew up with called Katamari Damacy. And in that, when the game loads between scenes, there's a character who kind of goes up and down in sine waves and leaves like a trail of multicolored hearts and a rainbow. So I replicated that in a terminal window. And I added, some extra messages about peace for all. I added some Easter eggs for people who, took the time to actually decrypt the script and looked at it before running it. And I composed it all together into what's called a self-decrypting bash script. Essentially what happens is you take the encrypted part and you just add the commands to decrypt it around it. So when somebody goes and keys in the entire thing exactly, what you need to do for base 64, because it is case sensitive, then it will play a beautiful Easter egg for you on any system that runs a bash style terminal, which is, these days, Linux, Mac OS, Windows 11. And that got the approval of the design team at Uniqlo. So I was very excited. So that shirt shipped worldwide in June of 2025. So actually not that long ago. I got to see programmers and hackers from Europe, from India, from the United States, from Canada, from Mexico, from Argentina, all take a crack at trying to crack my code. And I think the coolest thing about all of it, besides walking into a store and buying a t-shirt that I made, was getting to send a love letter to the thing that raised me. One of the most important things I learned as a designer is to really never give up on your dreams. That sounds trite and honestly overplayed, and you've probably heard that from 100 different people. But because I never gave up on that dream, and because I continued to harbor it, when the situation presented itself almost completely at random, I was ready. If anyone from Uniqlo or Akamai is watching, I want to extend my sincerest gratitude for working with me and my design team on this. You know, the internet is important. It's more than an economic benefit. It's more than a way to waste time. It's more than a way to insult strangers. It's something that's very precious, and it's something that's worth celebrating, and it's also worth defending. Otherwise, I will see everybody in the next one. Bye.